put Christ on the cross. But again, the judgment here, the judgment was something that was lacking, and certainly justice was not being done. And mercy, part of even the court system is to have mercy on those who deserve mercy. We would expect mercy on a first-time offender if it wasn't grievous, if it's something and the person shows remorse. Got Greg coming over here. And then mercy's a big part of sentencing or passing justice. Somebody who's a habitual offender versus someone who's not, should they receive the same punishment? That's where mercy comes in. Right?
Oops. Your matter. These are things that come naturally to eternal in the deepest part of itself are God, love, brother, we here are those things that are hidden in my heart. This whole this
So, hold on to that for a second. I'm going to ask you a question. What two commandments does everything rest on? And I think that this is basically the same thing.
These are the things that really compose who we are. And all the other things that are external it's the inside. If the core is not genuine, there's no real discussion about the exterior thing, the things of this.
So when we take a look at justice, we give a person justice for what reason? Or why do we show people mercy? Or why do we give people mercy? Because we love. We have love. We have compassion.
We're told we love because we just love. All of this is again about getting at the very center of, do you love God? Are you God's child? And if that center is right, then all of these things fall into place. But how can you judge? You can look
I can't. I can't. Only God can do that. So, at least two of these things are characteristics of who? God, right? Yeah. God doesn't have faith. Right. So, but he has righteous judgment and he has mercy. So, these are characteristics that are weightier because these are basically things that make up of God. If it wasn't for God, when we do justice, what does justice mean? What does the world think justice means? It's not certainly not what God thinks it is. When all these folks are out there burning buildings and stuff saying we want justice, do they really want justice, or do they want the outcome of something that they want to see the outcome of? And so justice is actually having a righteous judgment, whether people agree with it or not. What God has said is right. What God has judged is a righteous judgment, and we can be assured of that. Jim? Chuck Scott.
I think just short and sweet is we're being just when we're dedicated to the best outcome for the person that is being subjected to.
Right. And mercy, again, goes along with judgment, because if God was to judge us without mercy, what would that judgment be? So long. Look at all the things that mankind has done, and there have been some people who have been righteous. Doesn't mean that they haven't sinned. It does not mean that they haven't failed. But if God was to just do righteous judgment without mercy, we would have no hope. And so those are some things that we need to emulate from God. These are characteristics of God, important characteristics. And isn't the whole word of Christ in salvation, isn't that based upon really these three things? That there's going to be a righteous judgment. We need to have righteous judgment. That Christ has mercy on us. We need to have mercy on each other. And although God in Christ doesn't have faith, because they have sight, but we need to have the faith that these two things are going to be done righteously, and we have hope. We have hope of a judgment and the mercy. Is that any other comments that you may have? I mean, I think this is pretty deep, because the Pharisees are not doing this with Christ. We'll see that they didn't have mercy on Christ. They didn't have mercy on the disciples when Christ was going to the cross, being judged. And so we can't be like the Pharisees. Audrey?
We know that God has righteous judgment, and we know that he does show mercy. He's done that through sending his son. You know, John 3:16 is the verse that we all can quote. It's so familiar to all of us, but it does explain the plan of God in so many ways. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So he's loved us. He's shown that love, and he's shown his mercy to us and his forgiveness through all of those attributes that he has.
And the sad thing is that most of the world can quote that, but they want to leave off the last half of it.
It becomes such a verse that we don't give it much thought. It's so familiar
Right.
that we can just quote it, but it encompasses God right there. His love for us, what he's done for us. I mean, there's no way we can question it.
Absolutely. And I think with righteous judgment that, the tithing is going to be taken care of. If we judge ourselves and take a look at ourselves and we have mercy towards others, I mean, we're going to give to God what's God's. We're going to treat each other as we should treat each other, as brothers and sisters. And these are all things that we need in the church. And even in the New Testament, we find that some judgments aren't right, and they're pointed out. We find that we do find some examples of where there's mercy, but we find some examples of where people weren't so merciful either, and was condemned or talked about anyway. And certainly we need to have faith that God is there for us. So anything else? John?
I just think it's interesting, he says these are weightier matters of the law. And when we think about the law, and he's talking about the old law, he's talking about the Mosaic law. And when we think about the Mosaic law, we think no mercy. We think Achan being stoned. We think, all of the things that happen in the Old Testament, and we don't see, no, it's like Paul says, those things, the law was actually good. Problem was no one kept the law. That was the problem, that the blood of bulls and goats can't take away sin. So then, but even there, in the Old Testament, David sleeping with Bathsheba, he should have been put to death. And when Nathan the prophet confronts him and says, "Thou art the man," and he turns from his sins, and Nathan says, God has, forgiven you. He uses the word forgiven. And we understand, looking forward to the Messiah and faith, all those things. But my point is, there was mercy in the law. Not to say the blood of bulls and goats takes away sin, but these are the weightier matters of the law. This was the Mosaic Law 101. This is the foundation. And if anybody should have gotten it, it should have been the scribes and the Pharisees. And they've skipped, or they've forgotten, the Law 101. And because of that, it's they keep cleaning the outside of the dish, and they don't touch the inside of the dish, and it's just filthy.
Okay, Ann?
Well, the only thing I was going to say, it goes that they weren't doing their Old Testament law like they were supposed to. Even when they talk about giving their tithes, they gave it of anise and I can't even read my own right. But they were supposed to be giving a different. It was oil and different things. But they weren't even doing that. They changed it because that was they were getting anise and mint and this, and that was not what the old law taught them. And they weren't even obeying their old law. That's
Okay.
sad, because that it's just sad to think that people, these were men who were to take care of and look over the Israelites and keep the Jews in order with reminding them and reading the law to them. And if we do the same thing today,
Right.
we read this book and we sit and we talk about it, and we may go out and do the very same thing or something, or sin anyway. It doesn't have to be, what so much here.
So how does this apply to us, Ann?
Pardon?
How does this apply to us?
Well, we better check what we're doing and what we're saying to people. And we need to be trying to encourage more people to be here, like this morning, you know. And more people just to love God and want to serve him.
Okay. So how does this apply to us? Do we not have the same problems? I see a lot of heads shaking this way, but I don't hear any voices. John?
I think very often we focus on the symptoms rather than the cause of issues, whether it's in ourselves or others. Just for example, attendance. I mean, good grief, preachers harp on attendance, myself included, all the time. And it's like, guess what? It's not really an attendance problem. It's a love problem. And pretty much everything goes back to love. Yeah, I don't mean people are sick or people are traveling or things like that. That's sure. Sure.
To this virus as well. So they may come just to go and worship on Sunday because they want to limit their exposure. Again, unless we know somebody's part, or we talk to somebody, we do make some judgments on why people don't attend, why some people do this or some people do that. And sometimes those judgments, a lot of times those judgments aren't correct. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes among the brethren, you can give a lesson on something and say exactly what God said, and some of them accuse you of condemning the brethren. That's what a man told me some years ago. I told him what the Bible said about a subject, and I told him that I left that up to God, that judging. I told him what God said about it.
Yeah.
And no matter, I could tell you, you're going to hell 50 times, and you won't go unless you die in sin, you see. It's God's judgment what counts. And we always emphasize that, and it'll be right, and we'll be right in following it.
Right. And that's true. The world wants to think that we're condemning them and stuff, but what did Christ say about that? He said they've already condemned themselves. All we're doing is pointing out God's law. It's just like if you get pulled over by a police officer for speeding, that you may get a warning. They may let you off and not even have a warning. They may just let you off. But the fact of the matter is that, you were speeding. And, a lot of people want to argue with the police officer. Don't you know who I am? Or, why are you pulling me over? They just give the police officer a hard time. And the thing is that the law is what the law has out there. And, there's different reasons why people may do whatever they do. John?
I was just going to say, concerning the heart, I go back to the parable of the soils, and it's a soil issue. And to use that analogy and that metaphor, we don't know what's happening below the surface, but we do know what's happening above the surface. And that's where the Lord says, by their fruits you'll know them. And that's what we look for in ourselves first and others. And if the fruit's not there, then that tells you have a soil problem. And there's things you need to work on in the soil. It's real tempting to, I'm kind of an idiot gardener. I'm glad your wife's not here right now. She knows so much more about plants than I do. When I water plants, I'm sitting here watering the top of the plant, and I'm like, you got to get the plant real wet. It's like the plant doesn't drink through the leaves there, buddy. It drinks through the roots. It's a root issue. We're trying to feed the roots. We're trying to stimulate the roots. Let me dig around and dung it. It's a root issue. If the roots are good, if the heart's good, if the inside is good, the outward will reflect the inward. But if the inward's not good, it would be like if if the roots are dead and you think if you just keep pruning the bush, it'll be all right, it doesn't make any sense. You have to cleanse the inward, and don't neglect the outward, but if you cleanse the inward, it will manifest itself outwardly. And to your question about application, I mean, this is, when he says that they were hypocrites and they practiced lawlessness, can we do the same thing today? Oh, yeah. We can be hypocrites. We can think about tradition. We can bind our traditions on everyone else, just like the Pharisees did. And we're just as guilty, actually probably more guilty.
Sometimes we are, or just as guilty. Anything else on this one? Okay, let's move on then to somebody would read verses 25 and 26 in Matthew 23. Jennifer? Chuck's coming.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also.
Okay. So this kind of, I remember this parable every time you go to a restaurant, or we did go to a restaurant, and my wife wanted the straw with her drink. And it's not like going through the drive-through and you got a top on it and you use a straw. But you see people with a straw, they think the outside of the cup, they don't want to press their lips to the outside of the cup, which is being cleaned. And hopefully the inside's probably the outside's as clean as the inside. And yet I'm using a straw, so my lips, but this is kind of a unique parable. Do we not do the same thing? What is the significance of the cleaning of the outside of the cup and not worried about the inside? Grace?
Well, I mean, in the case of what he's talking about here, the Pharisees were clearly worried about what people saw, the outside. But the things that the people couldn't see, they weren't too worried about, which was their heart and the roots that Greg and John were talking about. So, I mean, they were really big on making sure the outside looked really good. But Jesus says you clean the outside, but the inside's still filthy. And so, I mean, their task, I mean, what they were doing was useless.
Absolutely. So what kind of filthy things do we have on the inside? Malice? The way we treat other people, the way that we feel about other people. And so what else do we have? We have a lot of, what about, the thoughts in our head? That's kind of what touches me here, is that, the outside, I may look good. I come in here, I sing and everything, but what's going through my mind? What's going through my mind? And Galatians 5. Which wolf are you going to feed? Or which food are you going to do? Are you going to go after the lust of the flesh? Or are you going to go after those things that God has given us as food, love and mercy and all of those things? God has given us two things. And so are we more carnal on the inside with our thoughts, or are we more spiritual? As spiritual as we're trying to look on the outside. Hold on, Chuck's coming.
catch up. Okay, I like verses 37 through 39, and I think Jesus, he was mourning for Jerusalem, but I think he mourns for us too.
Yes, he does.
He does. And I said, and it's just a couple of verses, and people read over them, but there's an awful lot in there, and it tells us about our Lord and who's going to take care of us.
Okay, any other comments on the cup? I think that's pretty. John?
I was just going to say, one of the things we have to do is use the cup to fill it with righteousness. An empty cup, you can clean the inside of a cup, but if you don't use it, it gets dirty again real quickly. But if you use the cup for its intended purpose, well, then there's no room for sin. If we fill it up with if we let the Lord fill it up, really, with what the Lord intends, it's like the old saying, you don't leave enough room for the devil to get in if you use the cup. Cleanse it and use it.
Okay, anyone else? All right, okay, Jim?
Those Pharisees were meticulous about small things, like they'd tie the small herbs, No wonder to do that, but they need to tie the greater things too. That's what the proverb was. They would strain out the gnat out of their wine and swallow a camel. The Arabs had a proverb too. You swallow an elephant and strangle to death on a flea. That describes the Pharisees pretty well.
Okay. Anyone else? Let's take a look real quick then at verse 27 and 28. Somebody would read that. Ashley, you want to read that?
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too, outwardly, appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness.
Okay, so this is kind of like the cup, but I think this actually goes a little bit further. I think with the cup, we may not have a lot of the pure thoughts, where we may have the beginnings of different things, but here it says uncleanness, which is far greater than I think what we talked about with perhaps the cup. You're talking about dead men's bones, you're talking about rot, you're talking about, I think this person here has even gone farther than maybe the initial first step on the way coming to this. Because what are tombs? It's where the dead is, isn't it?
Decaying
and that's where
bodies.
you've got decayed bodies. And how do you think it would smell going down into the tombs? Probably not very good. So, I mean, there's all kinds of rot. There's all kinds of uncleanness down there. I mean, there could even be disease and everything. So I think as far as with this, these folks have gone farther than those with the outside of the cup being clean and the inside being dirty. They haven't cleansed all of it. But these,
and to emphasize that, in both those verses, they say they're full of dead bones and they're full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. It's not just that they're a little dirty.
right.
They're filled to the top. I mean,
So I mean, this is a lot farther, and I know a lot of times people want to lump all these last several woes together, but I think there's a difference, or Jesus probably wouldn't have separated them out like he has. Again, what's with the whitewashing of the tombs? Did anyone take a look at that? Grace?
I got to see this once. We were on a tour of some of the areas of central Kentucky that were part of the Restoration movement. We went and saw, I'm not sure it was actually Barton W. Stone's grave, but the illustration still fits. That there was a monument or a tombstone there, and they had just whitewashed it. They had used a bleach and a cleaning solution to clean off all the algae and mold and stuff from the stone. And on a tombstone with a body under the ground, the stone looks really nice, might even smell clean, but there's still a rotting person underneath the ground.
Absolutely.
And so Jesus is saying, you make again the outside look really good, but inside it's rotten, it's corrupt and decaying.
And the whole purpose was to make the outside look good, because the whitewashing of the tombs usually happened this time of year right here, when all the people from all over the world was making their way to Jerusalem for the Passover. And so I think this was mentioned not just to mention, but because this thing was going on right now, was to point that out. So we will hit the last woe on Wednesday night, and we'll go into the rest of 42. Thank you so much for your comment.